for another Coffee with Kilroy, or what I sometimes call, many times call, okay, let's face it, I always call, well, almost always call, beverage in a book. My beverage, well, I think you know, whoa, geez, I'm almost out of coffee. Time to put on another pot. The book is 20 Decisive Battles of the World. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph B. Mitchell and Sir Edward Creasy. Now, this is a book that has spawned a hobby, pastime, career of collecting and following and reading other books about what are the decisive battles of the world. And we'll get into a little bit of a discussion of what it means to be decisive. But this book laid out, and again, by the time it was published, we didn't have modern conflicts, or a lot of modern conflicts on the slate. And so this ends at Stalingrad. But the 20 battles that it purports are the 20 decisive battles of the world are Marathon, Syracuse, Arbela, the Metaurus, Teutoburg, Wald, Chalons, Tours, Hastings, Orleans, the Armada, Blenheim, Poltava, Saratoga, Valmy, Waterloo, Vicksburg, Sadowa, First Marne, Midway, and Stalingrad. So those are its 20. But what did that lead me to do over the years? Well, that led me to, let's get some other books out here. I'm going to run out of coffee on this episode. That led me to start looking for other books that talked about what's a list. Everybody likes a list. I used to make all kinds of top 10 lists. Maybe I was inspired by Letterman, but I tended to make top 10 lists more in the comedy vein to get through unbearably boring meetings. But I like lists. Who doesn't like lists? So I started collecting books and finding books about battles and lists of battles. And this one, 100 Decisive Battles by Paul K. Davis, I really liked this one, and did the follow-up as well, which is Besieged, 100 Great Sieges. But then that didn't stop there. I started collecting all kinds of battle books. Here's 100 battles, and they tend to be somewhat, surfacey, very high level, not a ton of detail, just enough to get you acquainted with it. Example is, this one right here. These are almost like, for kids. Picked these up a while back, and they're just one pagers on the battles. But then they get a little bit more voluminous with 1001 Battles. This is by R.G. Grant, and there's a lot more information in there, but yet still somewhat surfacey. I'm gonna have to go up because I ran out of room here. Then I got the Battle 100. This is by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Lee Lanning. The stories behind the history's most influential. Now we're talking about influential. This one was 1001 Battles that changed. This was shaped. This was influential. Then we have 50 Battles That Changed the World by William Ware. The History of War in 100 Battles by Richard Overy. The 70 Great Battles in History. Now we're at 70. That's an interesting number. 100 is usually a round number. 50, I guess, is half that. 100 sounds, somewhat of an endeavor, and 1001, well, that's quite an undertaking. And I have more. Trust me, I have more than just this. And I might cover each of these in a separate offering or individually over time, in other coffees with Kilroy, especially if you ask me nicely, or if you're interested in any of these. I can kind of go over them and talk about what they have in store for you. But as you can see, this book here spurred that forward, or kind of prompted me to kind of look into that. And I didn't pick this one up till, I picked most of those up after I picked this one up. I had read this, checked it out of the library or something like that, but then I didn't own it, so I picked this up. And the version I picked up, I can't remember where I got this, but I got it used, and it is actually interlineated a little bit, or at least underlined there. At least just the first one. The rest of the book is pretty good. But I picked this up, and so now I have it. So now I'm going to cover it with some coffee. And when I say some, I'm running out of coffee. But I thought I'd share this with you. If you're familiar with this or any of those other books, feel free to chime in down below and let me know what you think about these kind of books. This one, covering only 20 battles, goes into a little bit more detail of each of those battles. Some of the ones that, those other ones I showed you, especially the ones that are like 1,001 or the 100, not as much. They might have maybe 3 or 4 pages at most on the battles. A lot of them are just doing a page on the battles. So they're really very high level and more of just an introduction to the battle as opposed to a deep dive. This one, there's a little bit more context and a little bit more information about each of the battles. But again, you're covering 20 battles in a book this size. Each one of those battles have had, numerous books written, whole books written on them, covering them, and multiple volumes sometimes covering them. So, these are not the end all to be all, but more of an introduction, and in this case, kind of a point of view on what is decisive. So with that, let's go a little bit closer in here. I need to start by saying that the 20 Decisive Battles of the World, this is the edition that was added to by Lieutenant Colonel Joseph B. Mitchell. The original book, which I do not have, and that's the one I originally read all those many years ago or checked out, by Sir Edward Creasy, was 15 Decisive Battles of the World. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... He probably stopped off at Waterloo. I don't have that handy, but I think he stopped off at Waterloo, and then Mitchell added these other 5, and then of course we could start adding to it like those other books have added to it. But he basically took the 15 battles, added these 5, and I'm not sure if he corrected some things in the original text or not. It's been a while since I've perused or read this one to find out what exactly did he do here. Let's see here. He says, after a very complete study of Sir Edward Creasy's book, I was able to arrive at 3 conclusions concerning it. First, although I began to find some errors in the text, his choice of the battles to be regarded as decisive to history of mankind was excellent. His reasons were clearly stated and fundamentally sound. In fact, I found myself using his rigid, clear-cut standards in choosing the next 5 battles to be added to the book. He was, in a sense, my teacher and led me in the selection of Vicksburg rather than the more dramatic Gettysburg in the American Civil War. In like manner, I chose Sadowa in the 7 Weeks' War as being more important to the rise of German Empire than any of the battles that followed in the later Franco-Prussian War. Also, being in America, I would have preferred to pick Normandy over Stalingrad. Being an American, I would rather pick Normandy over Stalingrad, but could not conscientiously do so. There is no doubt that the fact that the 2 military historians would select exactly the same list of battles, even using the same general criteria. However, I do believe that the first author of this book would agree in principle with my selections, as I have generally agreed with his, which I did not think should be changed in this revision. So, with that, and that I wanted to read that statement because that really is kind of the impetus of me looking at these other books. What do other military historians feel are the decisive battles, or the battles that changed the world, or the battles that were influential? And so you can divvy up or slice and dice decisive, influential, changed. There's a lot of different ways to look at the importance of a battle to the world or to history, or looking at it, what it is, what's the context of that battle. Was it decisive in the conflict that it was involved in, like the war that it was involved in, or was it decisive to mankind or to history in general? Those are all kind of different elements that different authors and different military historians or different, people might disagree on. It's kind of like the old baseball, arguments, sports arguments. You're always arguing who is a better athlete, who's the GOAT, arguing which battle was more decisive or more important based on, its context is always a kind of a hot stove type discussion. So anyway, that's another reason to look at these books is to get a different perspective or a different point of view on these conflicts and what their importance was. They might be very important to the conflict or the war or the engagement that they were part of, or they might have a greater meaning. They might have a bigger impact or influence or footprint on the rest of history. So that's what this book is covering. Oh, there we know. We see who the recipient of this book was. So what it does is this is going to cover those 20 battles, the 15 originally from Creasy, and then the 5 that are added by Mitchell. And they give you an introduction to the book, or an introduction to the battle, I should say. And you're going to get some maps in here. There's usually, in the wider conflicts, there's usually a more broader map or global situation or strategic situation at the time, and then there's usually a more detailed or tactical map of the battle. Not in all cases, but in most of these there are, and it's illustrative. I do like maps. I like the Osprey series of battles where they show like the different stages of the battle in maps and images. I tend to like that because I'm a visual person. But here's the Battle of Marathon, and again, you've got a little bit more of a context in these books, and here's even a timeline here. Marathon itself is, how many pages we got here? So we got page 1 to 22. So you got 22 pages on Marathon. That's a lot more than what you're going to find, let's say, in 100 Battles That Shaped the World, which is pretty much a page a battle. You got Syracuse is one of them. Again, a lot of these are formative for Western civilization. Here's the Siege of Syracuse, Battle of Arbela. A lot of the reasons why I picked these other books or started collecting these other books or started reading these other books is to figure out that notion of what is decisive or what are the most important battles in history. When you use a term like decisive, that has kind of that lends itself to the same kind of connotation or arguments that you get with like a sports award, like the most valuable player. Well, in baseball, that person's the most valuable player. Well, there was 3 other, Hall of Fame players on that team. So how's he really the most valuable player? That team was loaded. Look at a team that had one really star player that went to the World Series or came up short. Shouldn't that person be the most valuable player? Is it because sometimes stats don't shine out. Somebody might have a higher batting average or more home runs, but another person might have, more RBIs and more OPS and other stats. So it's not always apples to apples in some of these comparisons. And if a team is stacked, is one person really the most valuable player on that stacked lineup, whereas another team might have, I think back to one of my teams of that I was a fan of, or still am a fan of, the Royals. The 1985 Royals, they had one player over 300 and did not get the MVP. They actually won the World Series, but did not get the MVP. Don Manley got it that year, and that was a pretty stacked lineup, the 85 Yankees. A lot of potential MVP candidates on there, but yet Brett didn't get it. Is that sour grapes? Yeah, probably is. But it leads to that same decision. What is decisive? Decisive to who? Decisive to what? What kind of context? So other terms like changed history. Well, that's a different analysis. I mean, you're basically looking at what are the events that took place after that and what was its effect on those events. Most influential kind of takes a part of decisive and a part of change. When you take decisive too, decisive also is could be limited to the decisive in the conflict that it was in. I mean, did it kind of change the course of that conflict? That could be decisive. Midway was kind of a decisive battle in the Pacific in World War II. Did it change history? Yeah, probably, because it was decisive. It changed history, and maybe it meets influential as well. So maybe that meets all criteria. But a battle like Cana, very decisive. I mean, it was a complete destruction of the Roman forces, but very decisive battle. But did it change history? Well, after Cana, Hannibal did not take Rome, did not have the effort or the means to siege Rome, and did not take Rome, and ended up losing the war at later down the road. So was it decisive in that conflict, or decisive in that moment? So that's another thing that you're going to get into as well. So this book kind of goes into that, and goes into his criteria and why he thinks it's decisive. And then Mitchell follows that same by adding the 5 battles that he adds to it. But as you can see, there's a lot of ancient battles in here, getting into some medieval battles that you get into over time. And then I think Creasy ended up with Waterloo, which, again, is that decisive? What was the final battle of that conflict? But really, was it that battle that was that ended Napoleon's reign, or was it the circumstances and the alliances that had been built up to stop it once and for all? All interesting arguments that this book explores in a little bit more detail than some of those other ones that I pulled out there. Saratoga, of course, Saratoga clearly, changed kind of the morale and momentum of that conflict, of the American Revolutionary conflict. Poltava, Blenheim, there's a good battle of that right there, or a good image of that, as you can see here. And I like the imagery, this black and blue with the different forces laid out is pretty, is nice and clear. Again, not a ton of detail. This one, of course, you had the battle tactical map, and you had a little bit more strategic map showing the entire campaign, or at least that portion of the campaign at that time. So, I don't know, I find these interesting. This is not a book that you necessarily read cover to cover. It's one that, if you're interested in this one is good to read cover to cover, because you get the theme and the gist of what Creasy and Mitchell were kind of going for in finding decisive. But I tend to pull these out if I'm getting ready to play a war game or do something that interests me about a particular battle, and read up on it. I especially use these books here for that, if I'm interested in getting a little bit of a context of it, and then I'll try to find books that dive a little bit deeper into the conflict. This one, with that 20 to 30 pages of battle, is not going to give you all the detail you need, but it will give you a nice introduction, a little bit, maybe better than Wikipedia, I would hope. So there you have it. That's what these books are for. Interesting proposition. Again, love to hear your thoughts on these battles and the way they were selected, and your theories on these books. This book in particular, the 15 Decisive Battles, the 20 Decisive Battles, or any of these books or lists that purport to cover what is decisive, or what is influential, or what has changed history. Anyway, that is what I have for you today. I might go into this a little bit deeper in exploring, his criteria for decisive, but I wanted to at least start off with talking about this book and introducing all these other books that I might get into over time, because I find these somewhat fascinating. Again, I like lists and I like looking at these books, and I like comparing the battles that are on some lists that aren't on others and trying to figure out why and the like. But let me know your thoughts on any of this, and if you want me to dive into this and go into a little bit more of his criteria, and then maybe start comparing and contrasting it to some of these other books as well. Love to do that over time and over a cup of coffee. Almost finished it. I hope you're having a great day and finishing your coffee or whatever you're drinking. And if you're at the end of your day, because I don't know when you're watching this, hope you had a good one. Take care, all. Thanks for watching.